My son came home from baseball practice with a black eye, a gift from his coach. When I called the coach, he laughed at me and said, "What are you going to do about it? You're a nobody." He was right. I was just one dad. So I spent the entire night on the phone. And the next day, when that coach walked onto the field, before we get to it, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from today? And be sure to subscribe for our daily stories. Okay, let's head to that baseball field. My life, since my wife passed a few years ago, had been a quiet and sometimes lonely routine. It revolved around two things: my job at the auto body shop and my son Jake. He was 12 years old, a good, quiet kid with a heart of gold, and the absolute center of my entire world. And the center of his world was baseball. He lived and breathed it, which meant by extension that I did too. The town team, the Hornets, was a local institution, and the head coach, a man named Evans, was a local legend. He was a hard, old-school, take-no-prisoners kind of a coach. He won championships. And because he won, the other parents in our small, sports-obsessed town were willing to overlook his methods. They overlooked the way he would scream at the 12-year-old boys until they were on the verge of tears. They overlooked his punishing, military-style drills. They called it building character. I had always just called it bullying. But Jake loved the game, and he loved his team, so I kept my mouth shut. I was just a single dad, a mechanic, a nobody. I didn't want to be that parent who made waves. On this particular Tuesday, Jake was late coming home from practice. I was in the kitchen making his favorite dinner when I heard the front door open and close with a quiet, almost furtive click. "Jake?" I called out. "That you, buddy?" There was no answer. A cold, paternal knot of dread began to form in my stomach. I walked out into the living room. He was standing there, his head down, his baseball cap pulled low over his face. "Hey," he mumbled, trying to scurry past me towards his room. "Whoa there, champ," I said, my voice gentle as I put a hand on his shoulder. "Let me see your face." He kept his head down. "I'm fine, Dad, just tired." "Jake," I said, my voice now a little firmer, "look at me." Slowly, reluctantly, he lifted his head, and my world went red. A dark, ugly, and already beginning to swell bruise was forming around his left eye. His lip was split, a thin line of dried blood at the corner of his mouth. "What happened?" I asked, my own voice a low, dangerous growl that I didn't recognize. "It's nothing," he mumbled, his eyes full of a shame that was not his to carry. I fell in the dugout." "Don't you lie to me, son," I said, my voice now quiet but with an edge of steel. "Tell me what happened, now." And then the story tumbled out in a quiet, tearful, and heartbroken rush. They had been doing a fielding drill. He had missed an easy pop fly, the ball bouncing off the heel of his glove, and Coach Evans had lost his mind. He had stormed over, gotten right in my son's face, screaming at him, calling him a worthless, pathetic failure. And then he had grabbed my son by the front of his jersey and he had shoved him so hard that Jake had stumbled backwards, tripping over a bench and hitting his face hard on the hard-packed dirt floor of the dugout. The other kids, they all just stared, my son sobbed, the tears he had been holding back now streaming down his bruised, beautiful face. "It was so embarrassing, Dad." A rage so pure, so absolute, so primal rose in my chest that I thought I might be sick. "Please, Dad," he begged, seeing the look on my face. "Please, don't say anything. Don't do anything. He'll kick me off the team. He'll tell everyone I'm a baby. Please, just let it go." I held my son, my brave, wonderful, and terrified son. I held him until his sobs subsided. I got him an ice pack for his eye. I made him his dinner. and I put him to bed. And then I sat alone in the quiet, dark living room of my own home, the only light coming from the pale, ghostly glow of the television screen. But I wasn't watching it. I was just staring, my mind a raging, chaotic storm of a father's pure, protective fury. The image of my son's bruised, tear-streaked face was burned into my mind, a sacred and terrible icon of a line that had been crossed. He had begged me not to do anything, but his plea was the plea of a terrified child. My duty, my one true and sacred duty, was not to honor his fear, but to honor my role as his father, to be the one who stood up for him when he was too scared to stand up for himself. With a hand that was shaking with a barely suppressed rage, I picked up my phone and scrolled through the team's contact list. I found his name, Coach Evans. I pressed the call button before I could allow my own fear, my own doubt to talk me out of it. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice a bored, irritated bark. "Yeah, what?" "Is this Coach Evans?" I asked, my own voice a low, dangerous growl that I did not recognize. "Who's asking?" he snapped back. "This is Thomas Riley, Jake's father. My son just came home from your practice with a black eye and a split lip. I am going to ask you one time and one time only for an explanation." There was a pause on the other end of the line. And then he laughed. It was not a nervous laugh. It was a short, sharp, and utterly condescending bark of a laugh, the sound of a man who was so secure in his own power that he found my question amusing. "An explanation?" he sneered, his voice dripping with a casual, confident cruelty. "Here's your explanation, Mr. Riley. Your kid is soft. He missed a pop fly that a 5-year-old could have caught. He needed a lesson in concentration, so I gave him one." The sheer, bald-faced audacity of his admission of his complete and total lack of remorse was a physical blow. "You put your hands on my son?" I asked, my voice now a whisper, my mind struggling to comprehend the reality of what he was saying. "You shoved a 12-year-old boy." "Yeah, I did. And I'll do it again if he doesn't toughen up. That's my job. I make champions. And I'm not going to let some soft, pathetic kid ruin this team's chances." And then he delivered the final, fatal blow. The words that would seal his own fate. "What are you going to do about it, Riley? Huh? You're a nobody. Go ahead, complain to the league. My brother-in-law is the president. Complain to the other parents. They're not going to listen to you. They care about one thing: winning. And I," he said, his voice now a triumphant final declaration, "am a winner." And then he hung up. I stood there in the darkness, the dial tone a shrill, mocking sound in my ear. He had not just admitted to assaulting my child, he had celebrated it. He had mocked me. He had, with a breathtaking arrogance, laid out the entire corrupt and impenetrable fortress of his own power. And he had been right. I was a nobody, a single dad, a mechanic, a man with no power, no influence, no connections. A formal complaint to a league run by his own family would be a joke. It would be buried before the ink was even dry. And he was right about the other parents, too. They were so desperate for the reflected glory of a championship team that they had been turning a blind eye to his bullying for years. I felt a wave of pure, hopeless, and impotent rage wash over me. I had been defeated, not by his anger, but by his absolute and entirely correct, assessment of his own untouchable power. I sank down onto my sofa, my head in my hands, the coach's final, taunting words echoing in my mind. "You're a nobody." He was right. I was a nobody. One man, a single, quiet voice yelling into the wind. But as I sat there, in the quiet, dark living room, his words began to change their shape in my mind. You. Singular. He could handle one angry father. But could he handle 20 of them? A new, cold, and deeply dangerous idea began to form in the ashes of my rage. I picked up my phone again. But this time I was not looking at the coach's number. I was looking at the long, alphabetized list of all the other parents on the team. He had built his small, tyrannical kingdom by making us all feel like we were alone, isolated in our own quiet fears. He was about to find out what happens when the nobodies get organized. I sat in the quiet, dark living room, the glow of my cell phone screen illuminating a list of names. The Hornets baseball team, parent roster. It was a list I had only ever glanced at before, a collection of strangers connected only by the shared, simple fact of our son's love for a game. Tonight, I was about to try and turn that list into an army. My hand was trembling as I made the first call. My heart was a frantic, nervous drum. What was I doing? Coach Evans was right. These parents worshipped him. They would see me as a troublemaker, the bitter father of a soft kid trying to make excuses. They would probably hang up on me and then call the coach to warn him. I dialed the first name on the list. A man named Bill, the father of the team's star pitcher. He answered on the second ring, his voice a loud, confident boom. "Hello?" "Hi, Bill," I began, my own voice a little shaky. "This is Tom Riley, Jake's dad." "Oh, hey, Tom," he said, his voice now a little cooler, a little more guarded. "What's up? Everything okay?" I took a deep breath, and I told him. I told him the whole ugly story about Jake's black eye, about the dugout, about the coach's arrogant and unapologetic confession on the phone. As I spoke, the silence on the other end of the line was a cold and deeply discouraging thing. "Wow," Bill said, when I had finished, his voice now a careful, neutral instrument. That's a heck of an accusation, Tom." "It's not an accusation, Bill. It's the truth. The man assaulted my son." There was a long, heavy pause. "Look, Tom," he finally said, and his voice was now full of a weary and deeply disappointing finality. "Evans is a tough coach. We all know that. He pushes the boys hard. But he gets results. My kid got a scout from a major travel team looking at him last month because of this team. I'm sorry about what happened to your boy. I really am. But I'm not going to risk my son's future over a little roughhousing in the dugout. I can't get involved. I'm sorry." He hung up. I stared at the phone, a wave of pure, hopeless despair washing over me. Evans was right. They didn't care. They were so blinded by the dream of their own son's success that they were willing to sacrifice my son's safety for it. I almost gave up then. But then I looked at the closed door of my son's bedroom, and I pictured his bruised, sleeping face, and I knew I couldn't. I had to keep fighting, even if I had to fight alone. I dialed the next number, and the next, and the next. The story was the same, every time. A polite but firm refusal. "I'm sorry, but we can't get involved. That's just how Coach Evans is. My son says your son is just being too sensitive. With every call, my hope dwindled, replaced by a growing, sickening sense of isolation. It was almost midnight. I was on the last name on the list, a woman named Sarah, a single mom like me. Her son, a quiet, sweet kid named Ben, was the team's catcher. I dialed her number, my heart a heavy, leaden stone, expecting the same final, polite rejection. She answered, her voice a tired, gentle whisper. I told her the story, my own voice now a flat, defeated monotone, the words a script I had recited a dozen times. But this time, the silence on the other end of the line was different. It was not a cold, dismissive silence. It was a listening silence. When I was finished, she was quiet for a long moment. And then I heard a sound that I did not expect. A soft, quiet sob. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice a raw, broken thing. "I knew something was wrong." She told her own story. Her son, Ben, had been coming home from practices for the last month with a constant and mysterious stomach ache. He would be physically ill on the mornings of game days. He had lost his love for the game, a love that had once been the brightest light in his life. But he wouldn't tell her why. He would just say he was fine. "Last week," she said, her voice now a low, angry whisper, "he came home with a bruise on his arm in the shape of a man's hand. He told me he had run into a fence. I believed him, because I wanted to believe him." And with her confession, the first tiny crack in the coach's fortress of power appeared. I was not alone anymore. "What do we do, Thomas?" she asked, her voice now full of a new, fierce, and powerful resolve. "We keep calling," I said, a new, fragile hope blooming in my own chest. And we did. For the next hour, Sarah and I worked as a team. We called the other parents back, but this time the story was different. It was not just one angry father. It was two. It was a pattern. And as Sarah and I told our stories, one after the other, a new, strange, and powerful thing began to happen. The other parents began to talk. The mother of the team's shortstop admitted that the coach had called her son a pathetic excuse for a boy in front of the entire team. The father of an outfielder confessed that his son had been benched for an entire season for missing a single practice for a family funeral. The stories, the secrets, the quiet individual humiliations, they all began to come out one by one, and as they did, our small individual fears began to coalesce into a new and powerful collective rage. By 2 a.m, the revolution was complete. We had a plan, a simple, quiet, and absolutely devastating one. The next afternoon, the sun was bright and the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. It was a perfect day for baseball. As I drove to the field with my son, Jake, a strange, new, and unfamiliar sense of calm had settled over me. The impotent rage of the night before was gone, replaced by a quiet and deeply powerful sense of purpose. Jake was quiet in the passenger seat, his bruised eye a silent, colorful testament to the injustice we were about to confront. He was terrified. I was not. "Dad, maybe we shouldn't do this," he whispered as we pulled into the parking lot. "He's going to be so mad." "I know, buddy," I said, turning to him, "but there is a difference between being mad and being in charge. And today," I said, a slow, confident smile on my face, "he is not going to be in charge. We are. Now, are you with me?" He looked at me, at the new, strange confidence in my eyes, and a small, fragile, and beautiful flicker of his own courage returned. He nodded. We were the first to arrive. Coach Evans was already on the field, his arms crossed, a look of smug, arrogant impatience on his face as he stood on the pitcher's mound. He saw us walking across the grass towards him, and a cruel, triumphant smirk spread across his face. He was expecting a confrontation with a single nobody father he had already defeated. He was ready for it. He was going to enjoy it. "Well, well, Riley," he called out as we approached, his voice a booming, confident sound that was designed to intimidate. "Come to have another little cry? Or did you bring your kid here to apologize for being so soft?" I didn't answer him. I just stopped a few feet in front of him, my son at my side, and I waited. And then another car pulled into the parking lot. A mother and a son got out and began to walk towards the field. And then another car. And another. And another. I watched as the coach's smug, confident smirk began to falter, replaced by a new and deeply unfamiliar look of confusion. This was not a normal practice. One by one, in a slow, silent, and deeply powerful procession, the parents of the Hornets baseball team, the people he had bullied and belittled and controlled for years, walked onto the field with their children. They did not speak. They did not yell. They just, one by one, formed a large, silent, and completely inescapable circle around the pitcher's mound, around him. He looked around at the faces of the 20 parents who were now staring at him with a quiet, unified, and deeply, deeply angry expression. He looked at my face and he finally truly understood. The fortress of his power, a fortress he had thought was impenetrable, a fortress built on a foundation of our individual fear and our collective silence, had just, in a single, quiet, and devastating moment, been surrounded. And there was no escape. He was no longer a king in his castle. He was just a man, a bully, standing alone in the middle of a baseball field, completely and totally outnumbered. He finally desperately looked at me, a silent, pleading question in his eyes. He thought I was the leader. He was wrong. I was just the spark. The fire that was about to consume him was a fire of their own making. I stepped forward from the circle, not as a leader, but as a simple spokesman. "Coach Evans," I began, my voice quiet, but it carried across the silent, sun-drenched field with the weight of a judge's gavel. "You told me yesterday on the phone that I was a nobody. And you were right. I am. I'm just a mechanic, a single dad, a man trying to do his best." I then gestured to the circle of silent, powerful parents around us. "But we," I said, my voice now rising with a new and deeply satisfying strength, "are not nobodies. We are the parents. We are the ones who pay the league fees, who buy the uniforms, who drive our sons to these practices in the rain and the heat. We are the ones who trust you with the most precious things in our entire lives. And you," I said, my voice now a low, cold, and final judgment, "have broken that trust." He began to stammer, to protest. "Now hold on," he said, trying to regain some semblance of his old, bullying authority. "This is a misunderstanding. The kid, your kid, he's just soft. I was just—" "You were just what, Coach?" A new voice cut him off, sharp and clear. It was Sarah, the single mother of the team's catcher, Ben. She stepped forward to stand beside me, a lioness protecting her cub. "Were you just toughening up my son when you called him a pathetic, useless waste of a uniform in front of the entire team because he dropped a single pitch?" And then another parent stepped forward, and another, and another. Were you just building character when you made my son run laps in 90-degree heat until he vomited, all for being 5 minutes late because of a doctor's appointment? Were you just teaching a lesson when you refused to let my son go to his own grandmother's funeral and then benched him for the rest of the season? The stories, the secrets, the years of quiet individual humiliations that we had all, in our own fear and our own selfish desire for a winning season, allowed to happen, were now being spoken aloud, a rising, powerful chorus of a truth that could no longer be denied. The coach just stood there, his face a ruin of disbelief as the foundation of his small tyrannical kingdom crumbled to dust around him. I then delivered the final, killing blow. "The entire team, coach," I said, my voice a quiet, final pronouncement, "is quitting, effective immediately." I then nodded to Sarah. She stepped forward and handed him a thick, white, and very official-looking envelope. "And this," I said, "is a formal and legally binding joint complaint to the National Youth Baseball League signed by every single parent standing here today. It contains," I added, a slow, cold smile on my face, "over a dozen notarized and deeply detailed affidavits from our sons, outlining your long and frankly disturbing pattern of verbal and physical abuse." I watched as he took the envelope, his own hand trembling. I watched as he saw in that single terrible moment not just the end of his team, but the end of his career, the end of his reputation, and the end of his life as he knew it. He sank to his knees in the middle of that beautiful, sun-drenched baseball field, a broken, defeated man, surrounded by the quiet, powerful, and deeply, deeply angry army of nobodies who had finally and completely taken their power back. We did not stay to watch his pathetic private unraveling. Our work here was done. One by one, in a quiet, dignified procession, we turned our backs on him, took our son's hands, and we walked off that field, leaving him alone in the middle of the diamond, a king with no subjects, no crown, and no kingdom. The fallout was swift and absolute. The National Youth Baseball League, faced with a formal complaint signed by an entire team, had no choice but to launch a full investigation. Coach Evans was suspended, and then, after the stories from our sons were corroborated, he was fired and permanently banned from coaching in the league ever again. His reign of terror was over. But our story did not end with his defeat. It ended with our own new beginning. A week later, I was in a local pizza parlor with Sarah, the single mother who had been my first and most important ally. We were not celebrating. We were planning. The boys, our sons, Jake and Ben, and all the other kids from the team, they were heartbroken. Their team was gone. Their season was over. And their love for the game had been tarnished by the actions of a single cruel man. "We can't let him take the game from them too," Sarah had said, a fierce, determined look in her eyes. "We have to do something." And so, we did. The group of us, the 20 nobody parents, who had been united by a single desperate late-night phone call, we came together. We held a meeting in the high school gymnasium, and we made a decision. We would not let our sons be scattered to the wind. We would build them a new home. We started our own, new, and completely independent baseball team. We were a scrappy, underdog operation. We had no fancy sponsors, no official league backing, but we had something more important. We had a community. The other parents, the ones who were accountants and lawyers and graphic designers, they all pitched in. They designed a new logo. They fundraised. They navigated the complex paperwork of starting a new team. We called ourselves the Rebels. And when it came time to choose a new coach, I looked around the room at all the other more qualified, more experienced fathers. But Sarah stood up. "I think
she said, a small, proud smile on her face, "that we already have our coach." And every single parent in that room turned and looked at me. And so, my life took another strange and deeply wonderful turn. The story ends not with a victory, but with a simple, beautiful, and profoundly ordinary afternoon. It's been a year. I am standing on that same baseball field, but it is not a place of trauma anymore. It is a place of joy. The air is filled with the happy, chaotic sound of a dozen young boys laughing, with the clean, beautiful crack of a bat hitting a ball. I am not a mechanic today. I am a coach. Their coach. My son Jake is on the pitcher's mound. The scared, bruised, and silent boy from a year ago is gone. In his place is a confident, happy, and brilliant young man, his face full of a pure, uncomplicated love for the game. He winds up, he throws, and the ball is a perfect, clean strike right down the middle. I look around at the other parents in the stands, my friends, my partners, my community, and I think about that night a year ago when Coach Emmons had sneered at me down the phone line. "What are you going to do about it, Riley? You're a nobody." He had been right. I was. But I had learned the most important lesson of my entire life on that long and desperate night. That a single, solitary nobody, when joined by other nobodies, can become a force so powerful it can tear down kingdoms and build new, better, and kinder worlds in their place. My revenge was not in his ruin. It was in this. In the simple, beautiful, and deeply satisfying act of building a team. An absolutely powerful story about how a community of nobodies can come together to take down a bully. What a perfect and deeply satisfying ending. What do you think of the way the parents banded together to solve the problem? Let us know in the comments below. If you were cheering for this community's victory, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more incredible stories of karma and justice. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.